Good morning, baseball fans, and welcome back to Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. Do not be fooled. Do not be fooled by that fancy name. It's just me and some friends talking about baseball cards. Very excited to do this show today. This one's been in the works for a while. My guest and I are both collectors of the 1939 Yankees, but his collection is much better than mine, which is kind of the idea of this show as an entirety. But the 1939 Yankees have 11 cards in the 1939 Play Ball set, and I finished that at the National, getting the DiMaggio and the Dickey. And now I'm ready to do the show. So let me bring him on. This is Rob from the Baseball Time Traveler channel, who will obviously be linked below. But appreciate you coming on this morning. How are you?
Dan, I'm honored to be here. We have a mutual interest in a lot of baseball history, and I'm looking forward to talking about a great year, a very epic year in baseball history, 1939.
Yeah, I mean, I would ask you, and I always ask the guests, like, why this particular team, but I think it's kind of self-explanatory, right? I mean, you're a baseball collector and historian, kind of like I feel like I sort of am. And this particular team attracts you. Why?
Well, there's several things that were going on with 1939, and just kind of back up a little bit. Part of my collecting style is that I'm really more of a baseball historian / collector. And what I found was that when I reintroduced myself to the hobby, that there was so much history that I wasn't able to capture as a young guy because the internet wasn't around and access to that kind of information just wasn't there. So I basically started a collecting style where I, as a young kid, watched or listened to many historic games. As an example, the Sandy Koufax Perfect Game, I listened to that on the radio. I watched the Marischal Roseboro Brawl at the Bay. I watched all those 64, 65, 66, all those series in the World Series in the mid 60s and into the early 70s, frankly, from on there. But I was really fascinated by the teams and the players that participated in those historic games. So my collecting really focused on the players who played in those games as opposed to doing the entire sets. I'm not a set collector, and I just felt it gave me a little bit more of a focus. And then as I dug into it, having witnessed many of those games, I wanted to go further back in history. And 1939 was kind of a watershed year for so many things in the world going on. Obviously, World War II started, but if you think about it from a entertainment perspective, 2 or 3 of the epic movies of all time, The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, Stagecoach, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, on and on, Grapes of Wrath. So it just kind of, I felt, and I'm also a big Lou Gehrig fan. He's kind of really my all-time hero. And 1939 obviously was the year that his career ended, and he stepped away with the grace and dignity that exemplifies Lou Gehrig. And that kind of spurred me on to find out more and more about the 39 Yankees team. And it was a collectible set. There were only 11 players in the play ball set, so it made it relatively easy to gather that. I did have to wait for the DiMaggio card, so I'll tell you about that.
Yeah, the DiMaggio, and Dickey is a he's not a top level Hall of Famer, but that particular card is very popular because it's a beautiful card. So
absolutely.
And the rest of them were just kind of. It didn't take me long to do it, but the DiMaggio was the big one. So anyway, I interrupted you, sir. Continue because there's more.
Well, I was just kind of reviewing 1939, and so many other things happened that I can recall off the top of my head. Little League Baseball was formed in Williamsport. Cooperstown opened.
Right.
Yeah. There's just so much going on in 1939, and with there's some specific dates that I'll talk about as we get through some of the slides that you've got. But my collecting, I started back when I was in the mid 60s. I was born in 1955. So my first real recollection of baseball was probably the 63 World Series when Sandy Koufax and, the Dodgers swept the Yankees. And then I watched all the World Series going forward from there. But my first year of collecting was the 64 set, and Willie Mays was my hero. And, I used to hang outside. used to mow lawns and had a paper route and all that sort of thing. And packs were then 5 cents, and you get 5 cards. And my Grail card was this guy right here, and this isn't the actual card, but that's a copy of it. And then you get other cards like this,
Yep.
and I would trade away my mantles to get mazes, and we'd play games with them. We'd flip the cards, and heads, tails. We'd play closest to the wall, so the edges, the corners are just getting hammered. But we played with our cards. It wasn't like we were looking 40 years ahead and say, hey, these could be worth a lot of money someday.
That's just definitely not your childhood card.
No, exactly. So those cards obviously ended up, probably my mom, like everybody else, lost them through the mail, so to speak. But it was something that connected us to baseball. And then when I started Little League in 1966, I believe it was 65, 66 timeframe, I was on the Yankee team and I was assigned number 7. So all of a sudden I stopped trading away my Mickey Mantles and kept them. So it was one of those kind of stories. And then, like most of us, we stepped away from it as high school starts and that sort of thing. And then I started law school in 1979. And in 1981, a group of my fellow students, we sat around we were playing softball. We had a softball league through the law school. And after one of the games, about 8 of us sat down, and we decided to start a fantasy baseball league. And it was just, we didn't have internet, none of that stuff.
81. Wow. My first fantasy was like 1989, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 81 would be early. Like that.
Oh, yeah. We kind of made it up. And we literally had a lunch bag. We put names of the draft order and that sort of thing. And I remember my very first draft pick was Vita Blue. And, I picked up guys like Al Oliver, Dale Murphy, some of, that kind of era. And then what that spurred was, well, wait a sec. Back then, we didn't really have access to all the TV that you see now. ESPN was in its infancy. I didn't have cable TV. I was a law student. So it was one of those things. How do I connect to some of these ball players and see what they look like? Some of them you never even saw. So I started collecting, and I would go to the old Smart and Finals, which was kind of a lower end version of the Price Clubs then, and then it became Costco. And I would buy the boxes, and I'm just, ripping packs and all that sort of thing. Well, long story short, I, kept as many as I could. And part of that baseball draft thing that we did was we were able to retain players year to year. So the idea was you try and pick up a hot rookie. And where I'm going with that is I started collecting guys like Boggs and Gwynn and Ripken, all those guys from that era. And I started putting them in binder sleeves. So they were packed fresh. Fast forward 40 years. After I stopped collecting, probably 85, 86 timeframe, pre-junk wax era. So fast forward to 2 or 3 years ago, and my wife and I we have all these storage boxes of all these 1980s cards. And I said, they have no emotional attachment to me. I was an adult when I was collecting those. Mm-hmm. So I said, let's try and turn these into some money so I can acquire cards that really mean something to me.
Right.
So that's what led to sending them off. I sent 100 cards to PSA. It took forever to get them back. But once they get back, I sold them and was able to generate some cash to start buying some of the cards that you see behind me right now. And what helped me tremendously was I got a Gem Mint 10 on a Ripken Donruss rookie and a Gem Mint 10 of a Ryan Sandberg Topps, 84 Topps. Nice. And so that kind of gave me a big jump.
And now I know how you got the 5 and the DiMaggio 5.
Well, exactly. That's because the Sandberg I sold just a few months ago. So now I'm safe. I'm trying to recover. Now I have to cut my spending down tremendously since I acquired that DiMaggio. But that was something that I've been waiting for. I actually was hoping to get that at the National, but things happened there in my life that prevented me from really going forward. So I had to be patient, and I was thrilled to get the DiMaggio, not just because of the card, but it's a 5, and his uniform number was number 5, so it kind of has a little extra flavor to it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I didn't even think about that until now. Number 5. So I'm wearing my 70s Yankees shirt because I was a fan of the Yankees in the 70s as a kid. But the cool thing was that they had old timers games every year.
Yeah.
And I remember the early 70s, DiMaggio playing in an old timers game with
Yeah.
Mantle, all these other guys. And so all these names that we're reading out, most of these guys, and we'll get to them,
Yeah.
I remember them coming out as old guys onto the field for old timers
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Because the 39 Yankees, if you think about it, 39 to 70 is what, 31 years? So some of these
Yeah.
guys were in the 50s and 60s, They weren't
Absolutely.
that
Like
old.
we are now.
Right. Probably in better shape though. Anyway, so you sent me a ton of material and I really appreciate it because I got to read through a lot of stuff and I
Yeah.
had fun going through it, and we'll get to that later. But let's start going through. So the team, they won 106 games, which is pretty remarkable. I went through the season and they were in first place pretty much the whole season. They
Yeah.
had leads of like 5 and 6 and 7. I think the lowest they got was like 3 or 4 in like maybe July, and then
Yeah.
they ran away with it. So they were in control pretty much the entire season. Joe McCarthy was the manager. As you know, he managed the team for many years. By the end of the 40s, he was pretty much, his alcoholism and his age, and they
Caught
just
up with him. Yeah.
yeah. So the main batting. Look at this lineup.
Yeah.
It's Bill Dickey and Joe Gordon, Frank Crissetti, Red Rolfe. Red Rolfe, by the way, led the majors in runs and hits that season, and led
Yes.
the league in doubles.
Yeah.
They had 4 outfielders who were all top of the line guys.
Right.
Selkirk, DiMaggio, Keller, and Henrik all were starting quality players, but they had to share time, except DiMaggio didn't share any time. He had 381 that season and won the batting title and won the MVP.
Correct. Yes. And actually, to add to that, in the All-Star game, 6 of those Yankees were starters. So, yeah, it was roughing start of the game. Dickey, Gordon, Red Rolfe, George Selkirk, and Joe D.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the pitching staff wasn't too bad either.
No.
Ruffing and Gomez are, of course, Hall of Famers. But Bump Hadley had a pretty good career.
Yeah.
And then Monty Pearson, who we'll talk about a little bit later, is kind of an enigmatic figure.
Yeah.
And then the great Johnny Murphy had 19 saves, which is a lot for back then. But Murphy, as we talked about before, he went on to become the general manager of the 1969 Mets. And then Spud Chandler's there also. So that's
Yes, that's right. Just to add on to the importance of Johnny Murphy, 19 saves. I think in 1939, the Yankees pitching staff had 91 complete games. So it's a whole different ball game from what we see today.
Yeah, they if you look though, the starting they stretched it out. So nobody started more than 28 games.
Yeah, I think McCarthy's style was that way, where he actually, I know he mentioned Bump Hadley. He wanted to start him maybe once every week or 2 weeks. He felt that Hadley did better with more rest. So that was his strategy.
And that's kind of what, eventually Stengel would take over the team in the late 40s. And he had kind of the same theory, which was to spread out the innings, and except when it came to the World Series. And Al Reynolds pitched every game. But,
yeah, exactly.
But during the season, which is why Ford was unhappy with starting once a week. And when Ralph Houk took over the team, Ford started every game he wanted to start, and he won 25 games that year.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is you sent me a nice picture of the team. What should be noted, and we'll get into this in a little bit, is one of the players in the middle of that photograph is Lou Gehrig.
Correct.
Who we didn't mention there because 1939 was the year of his, they discovered that he had ALS, and, he gave his speech and all that. So, but we'll get into that.
In 1939, before you leave that, in the upper right there, Jacob Rupert, really, who was the dynamic leader of the, owner of the Yankees for years, he died in 1939, January 13th. So that was another monumental shift in baseball.
Yeah, he was the owner during the 20s when
correct
with Ruth. That's This is 39, so I guess he was
Yeah.
older at that point. So George is his son?
Yes.
And so explain. I saw the handbook,
Yeah.
and then so the 1930. That's the other thing we didn't talk about. 1939 World's Fair
Correct.
was in New York City.
Right. Yeah. Opened in end of April, and the handbook. I'll just show you this real quick.
You know,
It's really a nice little item. On the back cover, you can see that you have an opportunity. Sorry. To go to basically an academy with some of the top historic guys in the game, including Babe Ruth. And then inside they got all sorts of tidbits of information. And I found Lou Gehrig's final game, or not final game, but his start of his streak. And then they had Babe Ruth's very first game, and they've got a roster of Ruth's home runs going through his career there. So
Right.
it was just a nice little item to have that was pretty timely for 1939.
Absolutely. And then what's the postcard on the bottom right?
Those are actually letters,
Letters.
envelopes, and in the bottom right, that would have been the issue on June 12th. This is postmarked June 12th, 1939, when they had the Cooperstown opening, and they played a pickup game that day with all the Hall of Famers and then some other players. In fact, Arnt Jorgens, the reserve catcher for the Yankees, played in that game.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And we'll see Arnt in a little bit.
Yeah.
With his play ball card. The other thing is 1939 was the 100th anniversary, or recognized as the 100th anniversary of baseball. Is that Cartwright?
That is Abner Doubleday.
Oh, that's Doubleday. Okay.
Yeah, who as we know, has kind of been credited but miscredited with inventing the game. But he was honored. Essentially, they've in this particular magazine, they referred to him more as the patron saint of baseball.
Okay.
And they do address the Cartwright issue and the commission that investigated the whole start of the game. But it's a fascinating issue. And he actually, Abner Doubleday, just historically, he was a captain in the United States Army, and he was credited as firing the first shot at the Confederacy from Fort Sumter in 1861. And then he also was heavily involved in the Battle of Gettysburg. So Doubleday was quite a soldier. I think a lot of myth was created around his involvement with baseball, but that's an issue that has got a lot of fun articles to read, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about collecting these magazines.
There's a lot of research on that. I know John Thorne, who was the head historian at Cooperstown, is one of his pet projects is the earliest baseball reference that he can find. And it's sort of, it's not like somebody just walked up onto a field and invented a game overnight. It's something that's developed over the years. So we mentioned it briefly, but I guess the sort of pale, that the sadness that sort of engulfs that team that year, which is what makes them remarkable in terms of their performance on the field, is that their captain and maybe the greatest player in the history of the franchise. I mean, Babe Ruth obviously, but he wasn't totally Yankees. Gehrig was all Yankees from day one.
Yeah.
That he was diagnosed with a disease that would be terminal and ultimately would have to end his streak that year.
That's right. Yeah. And the magazine there on the left, that's from 1935. And I thought it captured what I do, a little side collecting that I'm doing now. I'm trying to collect all these baseball magazines from that era that depict Hall of Famers on the covers. Mm-hmm. So I've collected quite a few so far. Some are a little pricier than others for obvious reasons, Gehrig being one of them. But that's the 35. It kind of shows him at his peak. He won the MVP in 36. And then you've got on the right there, that's a picture depicting him. I think that was taken sometime after he had retired but was still actively, a cheerleader for the Yankees through the
Yeah,
season. That's the August 39 issue.
Yeah, it's one of those photos that sort of is used to kind of capture that he was no longer playing, and
Right.
it's an iconic photo.
Yeah.
And
Kind of longing to be back out on the field. And
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
there's like a sadness to it that's pretty palpable.
that's
Um,
right.
so uh, there's there's that wonderful swing of his that I thought would be terrific to show alongside the photo with Babe Dahlgren,
Yes.
who would end up being the first baseman for the majority of 1939.
Yeah, kind of a classic passing the baton photograph. And
Yeah,
that's the beauty. That's the beauty of a lot of these old magazines. Is I'm just fascinated reading history. Back then, it was just current events, and
yeah,
now it's history. And you'll see many of the photos as you go through those magazines that ended up becoming baseball cards later, or at least part of baseball lore. So
yeah.
it's fascinating. I'm really glad I started that project of collecting these magazines because I, as a historian, it's fascinating for me to read that.
Yeah, I've actually started collecting some yearbooks. The for particular teams,
Yeah,
and
sure.
those the photographs in there are generally team issues,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
but they can be really good. So it's the same photograph, but it's the Who's Who of Baseball 1937, and then the
Yeah.
Who's Who of Baseball 1939, which has the great Jimmy Fox on the cover.
Yes. Yeah, and those two basically you open the book and you're going to see inside cover shots of future Hall of Famers. Obviously, they were just all stars at that time. I think in the Gehrig one, there's Carl Hubble and I forget who's on the back cover, but essentially they just have the biographical statistical career of any player in Major League Baseball for that particular year.
And then there's the rookies of 36, featuring one Joe DiMaggio, who kind
Yeah,
of
they picked him right. I mean, everything you read about Joe D in 1936, they had pegged him as the future Babe Ruth. He was Mr. Baseball,
yeah.
and he lived up to it, certainly.
Well, he came onto the scene and splashed right away. I mean, he
Yeah,
was, they were winning the World Series every year, and he was, how many MVPs did he win? Four, I
he
think.
won 3 MVPs. Yeah,
Three,
yeah,
including
yeah,
39, which I think I mentioned before.
that's right. Yeah,
Um, and here are I guess the two main stars of the 39 Yankees, which, as we saw from the numbers, were an incredibly well-balanced team with a lot of
yes,
great players. But I guess these two guys would be the
yeah. You
best.
had five 300 hitters. You had 5 or 6 pitchers over in double-digit wins. And I mean, it just top to bottom, no weaknesses on that team. And even Frankie Corsetti, I think, who had the lowest batting average of them all, a stellar outfit, shortstop,
Yeah.
one of the best fielders ever.
Yeah, it was sort of weird. It was sort of weird looking at his stats. He batted like 239 or something, but
Yeah.
he had over 700 at bats.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he knew how to get on base,
Yeah.
and he got a lot of walks, and he was very crafty as far as getting himself on base.
Well, we'll see a card in a little bit that I have had for years that I never showed before, and it's a cool one. But it's Crissetti on the base pass.
Yeah.
And then with another Joe DiMaggio on the cover of Life magazine.
Yes.
That is iconic.
Yes. And if I could just give you a quick story on that time frame. This came out May 1st, 1939. Well, 2 days earlier, April 29th, several things happened. One, DiMaggio was seriously hurt, and he was chasing down a fly ball and caught his leg, and looks like from photographs I've seen, he basically tore some lower leg muscles. He was afraid that he had broken his ankle, but it was just fortunately some torn muscles that healed. So he was out for a month. But
Uh,
on April 29th, that's kind of a key day in baseball history. That was the day Lou Gehrig had his last base hit. Buddy Rosar that was his first appearance in a Yankee uniform on the field. He later replaced Bill Dickey as the catcher.
Mm-hmm.
You had, Charlie Keller came in to replace Tommy Henrik. I'm sorry, he came in to replace, who did he replace? I forget, but it was his first appearance as well.
Right.
And then the following day, that was Gehrig's last game. And Babe Dahlgren obviously came in. But I just thought that the confluence, and also April 29th, that's the day the World's Fair opened. So there was a lot going on in the world in that 2 or 3 day time frame.
Yeah, not to mention overseas, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Things were starting to really heat up. Yeah.
Keller had spent multiple years in the minors, ripping up the minor leagues, and they didn't bring him up because they didn't have a space for him.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess they finally found some space for him. And I assume that's Lefty Gomez on the right there with that.
That is correct. Yeah, Lefty Gomez, who obviously 4 or 5 20 games straight seasons. I mean, just a fantastic pitcher.
He I know he's in the Gowdy set, and I have he obviously is play ball set, but I want to show later on a really nice Gowdy premium of his. And just pay attention to that windup, because we're going to see that big leg kick windup later on from a different pitcher in a card that I absolutely adore. So yeah, we you and I have this in common, the 39 play ball set, which only has 11 Yankees, and we'll get into it. It's missing Gordon and it's missing Crosetti, which I think are probably the 2 most important players.
And Red Rolf too.
Red Rolf too, yes, of course. But it does have these 3 Hall of Famers, DiMaggio, Dickey, and Gomez. Gomez, I think I won that for a fairly cheap amount on a auction site, but the other 2 I bought at the National, which I've talked about on this channel multiple times. The DiMaggio was part of a bundle with the 54 mantle on the first day. I got rid of about half of my budget on one.
Yeah, you must have been flying high though. Those are 2 great acquisitions.
Yeah, the 54 mantle Red Heart was and then in the middle, the Dickey, I think, was maybe the beginning of me becoming really patient in wanting to buy a particular card with a particular look to it. So I went through a lot of different Bill Dickey cards from 39, a lot of eBay. I went through the National, but I found this 5. The dealer's name is Tim. I can't remember his last name, but he's a fairly common dealer for the National, and he's like a Midwest guy. And I think he actually is going to be at Strongsville too. But he had a nice deal on this, and it was everything at once,
Yeah.
Nice center, no staining or anything, but very
It's
happy.
a great pose too. A classic Bill Dickey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the card itself is just, particularly attractive catcher card. And I think all 3 of these cards I purchased ungraded and graded them. I know the roughing I bought from now I can't, my brain is fried. I can't remember his name, but there's a kid that he's in his 20s who deals a lot online, and he's got some great cards, and I got that raw. The other 2 I believe I bought at Strongsville.
Great cards. Yeah. Really.
No, those weren't Strongsville. Those were Collector Connection, Scott Russell's auction site, and they were advertised with that type of grade. And so when I put them in and they got those grades, I was pretty happy.
Yeah.
And then 3 more: Selkirk, Dahlgren, and Monty Pearson. So these 3 cards I know I bought at Strong. So Monty Pearson is kind of an interesting character, because he was, I don't know if he was a hypochondriac or if he was just injury prone, but he was a little bit of a head case. But when he was right, he was fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, he definitely, I think he kind of picked and chose games he wanted to throw. He definitely would find ailments that would allow him to gracefully miss a start or two or three.
And they got impatient with him, but it's at the end of the season they were very happy with what he.
Yeah. Well, just a little side thing. Pearson was the first guy to throw a no-hitter at Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
Yeah, he did that in 1937, I believe. And then he also is he had a pretty good career record. He was 100 wins, 61 losses.
Yeah.
And but he was kind of a strange cat.
And then these are the last two. Arndt, of course, we mentioned before, is backup catcher. I think I bought that raw for like $10, which is why it was only a 2. It's got a crease in it. The player on the right, part of what and I think you might agree with me on this, part of when you collect, you want to collect good people. You want the history to be good. So I don't really collect Pete Rose at all. I avoid the pre-integration guys who were like the Dixie Walkers of the world. And Jake Powell is a problematic player to collect, but he's in this set.
Yes.
He's player number 11. And I guess Jake Powell's worst event in his career was intentionally injuring Hank Greenberg because of thoughts that Jake Powell may have been anti-Semitic, but
yeah. And then he also had that controversial interview in the offseason. I don't know if you're aware of that one.
Oh, no, not.
Yeah, he was interviewed and said, "Hey, Jake, what do you do in the offseason?" He goes, "Well, I'm a cop. I'm up in somewhere in New England. I might have been Boston." He says, "Yeah, and I just go out and crack these guys over the head." And he used a racial epithet that I won't use.
Okay. Yes.
So he definitely had some issues. And then and he's the number 1 card in the set, which is yeah. So they could have replaced him with anybody like Rolf or Crosetti. I mean, what are they thinking? But his demise, right? You remember the story on that one?
Oh, yeah. Wasn't he? Was he killed in a bar fight or something?
No. Here's what happened in 1948. He was caught passing bad checks.
Oh, that's what it is. Right.
Yeah, and they arrested him, took him to the police station, and he pulled out a revolver and shot himself, killed himself. Yeah. Tragic character, but I'm right with you, Dan. As soon as I become aware historically of any player that's got a issue that is problematic, and whether it's racial or whatever, I don't collect their stuff, and I'll get rid of it. And there's some key players in baseball history that had some of that, and I just won't chase them. So
I mean, some of it, like the Ty Cobb stuff, I think was there's historically, I think people are revising the history on Cobb that maybe he wasn't as bad as he's portrayed. Let's say in the Ken Burns documentary.
Yeah.
Some of the literature was inaccurate, and a guy like Enos Slaughter, who was said to have spiked Robinson. Ends up wasn't, there's a whole, and he's actually portrayed poorly in the Ken Burns documentary too, but the Enos Slaughter story is of course a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
And I did a show, and it's on For Collectors now, about the 48 Indians, and Eddie Robinson, who was one of the 3 people who did not shake Larry Doby's hand. The research in the book for the author Luke Epling, who was on the show with us, sat down and did a lot of research on this. And the Robinson thing is also a little bit less black and white, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because a lot of his animosity towards Doby was baseball related.
Yeah.
He was a guy coming in to take his job. He felt, and in that sense.
Right.
It's less racial, although I think there was some racial element to it. But sometimes these people are more, 3-dimensional.
Exactly. And on the flip side of that, when I find out about a player who does a special thing to exemplify who they really are, Joe Gordon helping Larry Doby, and I'll chase Joe Gordon. That's why I've got several items of Joe Gordon, because I really respect the guy like that,
Yeah.
Pee Wee Reese. I'm an old time Giants fan, but Pee Wee Reese, I got his autograph on a through the mail thing 40 years ago, and that's one of my cherished items in my collection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So we now go to your collection of 39 Yankees, and the far right is the one that is very interesting to me.
Is that DiMaggio?
Having chased that card and priced it, and I know what generally the price, the time, the money in the particular
Yeah.
numbers. So I know that this is a quite lucrative card, so to speak.
Yeah, well, it's obviously it's something that I had to make a lot of choices about, a lot of planning, and it was a card that I watched a video of Jason, Everyday Card Collector, and it was a group thing. It might have been on Four Collectors, I don't remember, but the topic really was about if you see a card that you might be stretching it, but that could go away and you'll never see it again. And when I saw this card and the fact that it's so well centered, it was number 5, which is DiMaggio's number.
Yes.
And it was the last card that I needed for that set. And I said, I got to go for this one because I don't think, even though I did spend quite a chunk of money for it, it's an investment for me long term. I'm an old guy now, so I want to be able to plan ahead for my family. And I think I might have told you earlier, but other than the DiMaggio card, I think every card in my collection I bought ungraded.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through, and I've got a pretty good success rate. I've had a few fails, but for the most part, and I'm not going to spend super big dollars on any card that's ungraded, but I feel very fortunate that I've been able to put a collection together. I don't go to card shows. I've been to 3 card shows in my life, and one was back in 1982, and that's where I got Bob Feller a signature autograph from him. And then about 2 years ago, I went to a local one. I live in Southern California in Palm Desert, and I went to one in Palm Springs, and I walked in, and there was one table of vintage. Everything else was Pokemon and modern cards and all that glitz and glamour. And I looked at the vintage table. I go, well, all the cards I have right now are better than these cards. So that was a fail. And then obviously I went to Cleveland last summer, and that was just a tough experience for me. I was so thrilled to see everybody having a great time. I had to go into kind of my own little world at that point. And I ended up buying a bunch of Green Bay Packer $1 cards in preparation for the Ice Bowl video that I did a few weeks ago. So, but to get the DiMaggio card really was a big deal, and it means a lot to me now because that's really what I was going to be chasing in Cleveland. And now that I've got it, I'm going to dedicate it to my family and take care of it from there.
Well, it is a gorgeous example, and I think you have a great eye. And is there and the rest of we'll get into the rest of the set, but I think you hit it well with the Dickie. I don't know what you spent on it.
Here it is, by the way, so you can.
Oh, there we go. Let's go. There we go. Nice. I mean, I don't know why you would need a higher number. I mean, to me, that card is exactly what you would want, right?
Right.
I mean,
it to me it just perfect. And yeah.
No reason.
Yeah, and the back's beautiful too. And
nice.
Yeah, and it's something I feel very blessed to be able to have it.
Well, the nice thing about it is it's the eye appeal is far exceeds the number that was assigned to it by some guy in an office in Florida.
Right. Right.
And so the value of it is enhanced by the fact that the eye appeal is better than the number. So the trend in vintage, a great trend in vintage, is to look at the eye appeal.
Absolutely.
The card, and the number is just a guide. It's not the be all and end all. It's a guide.
Yeah.
And in that sense, this number is maybe a little misleading because that card is a lot nicer than the number that was signed to it. Is there a particular reason why all of the cards are in SGC holders?
I am, let's put it this way. Being the age I am, I don't have time to wait around 4 to 6 months for PSA cards. It's like I'd rather, and every SGC submission I've made, and I probably made about 8 or 9 now, it gets back within 2 to 4 weeks max. And and to me, the vintage stuff, as many guys, and we all watch those channels, I just think the SGC kind of brings out the vintage stuff a little bit better.
Yeah, in certain sets, it's particularly this set. I mean,
oh yeah,
I have, as you will have seen, like 4 of these in PSA holders. I don't, that's a 5, and it's a clean 5.
Yeah,
I think yours looks better in the tux than in this PSA holder. But
well, crack it out and go for it, Dan.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna I'm not. I do have the entire 48 Bowman set in all SGC slabs, and I did that for a particular reason, so that it could, it would be uniform. But I have a lot of Frankenstein sets, like where I have different holders and stuff. So, but let's see what we got here. Okay, this is the other 4 and 7. So yeah, this would be 7. I'm looking at the Henrik, the 7.5.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's off center. Just a little bit, but it's, that's where you get the you get a nice number grade, but the eye appeal isn't as stunning as a well-centered card. So
and mine is sharp too, but it's off centered. And I submitted this myself, and I only ended up getting a 5. So I think SGC likes you more than they like me.
Well, if that's the case, I'm going to keep sending cards in.
So we're going to look at some other cards that are not the 39 play ball set. Which let me just go back. I would recommend anybody who has any interest in the Yankees to go ahead and do this set. Yes, you have to buy the DiMaggio, but at the end of the day, you will own a 1939, play ball DiMaggio, which is worth it. But the rest of these cards are all just terrific cards. There's a couple of, portraits, but these posed swing pictures are really, really nice.
Yeah, they are. And I know a lot of guys don't prefer the black and whites. It's an acquired taste. Yeah. But I do think that this kind of exemplifies the era. It was the end of the Depression, start of World War II was coming. There's a lot going on there, and to have a flashy, chrome refractor type card of this era, I don't think it would make sense.
Exactly. And I say this a lot. I'm a big fan of 30s cards, and the black and white, and just the artwork and the way they did the photos. There are photos that just scream 1930s to me. Yeah. And, that's the historical aspect of it that really, like you said, is faithful to the time period. So, yeah, DiMaggio. I did a show on DiMaggio early on in my channel. And I've had all these cards for a little while now.
Yeah, fantastic examples. Wow.
The Burke Ross is his last playing days card. There's a 52 Burke Ross. The Bond Bread, I don't know how I got it, but I got a great deal on that from Love of the Game Auctions. The exhibit is a fun one because I did a whole show on this early on in my channel. There's writing on the back, and I researched the guy and I did a whole thing on that. It was fun.
I've been looking for that exhibit. But my funds right now are a little short, so
this is
have to postpone.
It's the easiest DiMaggio card to buy financially.
Yeah.
I think it's a 1.5 because it's got writing on the back, and you can see the corners are a little white.
Now, did they date that for you, or is it just 39 to 46?
It's just 39 to 46.
Okay.
It's possible that there's a way to date it for a particular date,
Yeah.
or year, but I don't know. And I actually, I'm never going to get rid of this example because of the writing on the back and all the work I did. And it's a special card for me.
Yes.
The card on the right is a very expensive card, but because of a tiny piece of paper loss in the middle, if you can see, it looks like a triangle in the top. That this card cost me far less than it might have otherwise.
It's a beauty, absolute
yeah,
beauty.
I got that at the Chantilly show in I think 22. So the only time I ever went to Chantilly, and that was my biggest one. Now you have two items here that I'm not 100% familiar with.
Yeah. The one on the left, that is 1938 Our National Game pin. And they had a set. I think it's about 30 players, maybe more, but that's Lou Gehrig. And I was a little disappointed because I underestimated the size. I thought it was going to be about the size of a quarter. It's about the size of a dime. But it was my first playing days acquisition of a Lou Gehrig item. So I felt, okay, I'm good. And then the DiMaggio card there, that's from the 1982 Diamond Classics Big League Collectibles set. And this was, I sent it off through the mail, sent it up to San Francisco, and it came back. And I think that autograph is just stellar.
Really?
And it was my way back in 1982 in that second phase of collecting to acquire old time looking cards. Again, because all you had back then, you get catalogs and sports collectors digest and that sort of thing. But, everything was kind of through the mail, and, I was still in law school at that point. So I said, hey, this is a nice, easy way. You buy a set of, I think it was 55 cards, primarily Hall of Fame players. And, I've got DiMaggio, I've got Pee Wee Reese, Johnny Mize, Joe Wood, Stan Musial. And those all came back through the mail, and it's something I've kept that ever since.
Well, those are some pretty impressive TTMs.
Yeah. They're not going anywhere.
Was there a fee? Did you put money in the envelope?
Oh no fee.
These were just straight.
Just a self-addressed return envelope. That's it.
Yeah, because you do TTM now. The majority of the players want at least $10. Even guys
which kind of makes me laugh because, no offense to the autographs of today, but I can scribble too. And, you go back, and I forgot to mention Charlie Gehringer. I have two of his, and
yes,
he has probably the most classic cursive writing autograph in history. And DiMaggio wasn't bad either. All those guys learned to write.
Yeah.
And an interesting story, Arnold Palmer used to say, he used to tell the younger players on the tour coming up, he said, if you're going to give an autograph, write it so people can read it, because that's what it's all about for these kids and autograph seekers. They want to be able to identify. And I just think that, that era, these guys really knew how to write, because as you can imagine this, as kids, we were growing up, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Learning to write in cursive.
Well, I don't really collect modern autographs, but I know exactly what you're talking about. The scribble.
Yeah.
But I collect autographs from the 1970 set, which I'm built in autographs.
Yeah.
And I have about 300 or so. But yeah, you're right. Some of these autographs are just fantastic.
Yeah, it's not to demean them. It's still the autograph, but it's one of those things. If you don't have the card or something to identify whose autograph it is,
right? Who is it? Well, there's a whole. I should mention this. There's a whole Facebook. I guess it's a group, Facebook group. It's titled like, "Who is this autograph?" Every post is, "I have this ball. Can somebody tell me who this is?" And invariably, they are able to figure it out. But it's an entire Facebook group just because people can't write their name clear enough to be able to see it.
Yeah.
So these are two other Bill Dickey cards. You have this also. It's the 36 Scouty Premium. It's a bit of a big card, but I love it. And this card came as a gift in a Secret Santa. There you go. Yep.
Yeah. And the reason why this got a 1 is that the back is just trashed.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's probably some like
It's pulled right out of a book or something,
yeah,
scrapbook.
yeah,
But I thought the front really
yeah.
came out nice.
It's a very inexpensive card too.
Yes.
Because I priced it out at some point when I owned a lesser copy of it than this for. The Bill Dickey on the right is his 1933 Gaudi. That is considered his rookie card. It's a
Beauty.
one priest. I bought this at the 2022 National at Atlantic City for something like $110. So,
Oh, great buy. Wow.
very happy to get that.
Absolutely.
And here are two of the Dickey cards. The one on the right we just saw. The one on
Yep.
the left is an exhibit, and I should mention that Bill Dickey, although a right-handed catcher, was a left-handed hitter.
Yes.
And there he is with his left-handed hitting swing. It's a beautiful card.
Yeah.
That exhibit. And then these are very big. As you can see, it's like the size of my head. These are the 39 Gaudi premiums. R303B is the Bill Dickey. And I absolutely love this Bill Dickey.
When I saw that, I go, oh my gosh, that is just a fantastic card.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And I purchased this ungraded and sent it in. The 4 is it's a little bit of a generous 4, honestly, because there's some stuff around it. Now this is the Gomez, which I don't know why it seems to not really have much of a top border. I can't. Oh, I think it's inside of the slab. That's why.
It slid up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not moving. But anyway, so I love this also. I don't love it as much as the Dickey, but I think these are both terrific
classic poses.
Like I said, they're very big. The slab is very big. These are, I guess they're about maybe 4x6 inside, and then the slab itself is like 6x8. And you have this gentleman, Joe Gordon, who we talked about.
Right there.
Yeah, that is a good one. That is a really good one. And Joe Gordon.
This was one that was prompted by that Larry Doby story. I said, if I'm going to get Joe Gordon, this is the one I want to get too.
Joe Gordon would be one of 2 players who were traded for each other in one of the most useful trades for both teams. Gordon, I don't know why he was traded from the Yankees, but they got Allie Reynolds for him, and Allie Reynolds went on to be, a major contributor to multiple World Series victories.
Yeah,
including 52, where he pitched in 4 different games.
Yeah.
And Gordon.
What was his name? What was his name? Chief, the Big Chief, or something?
Yeah.
What was Allie?
Allie Reynolds was a hard-throwing right-handed pitcher who won 20 games several times, and like I said, was clutch in the World Series. I have Gordon with the Cleveland Indians in 1950 Bowman. He went on to play for Cleveland and won the World Series in 1948. And was a major contributor to that team. So he's beloved in Cleveland. I found out from doing that show, and also a major contributor to multiple Yankees World Series teams.
Mm-hmm.
And overall a terrific person. So good to see. I actually should get more Gordon cards, including
a good guy to collect.
Yeah. Now on the right is a card I've never shown on my channel before because it's never come up. It's a 1936 National Chickle, the R313. I'm reading right off the label.
Mm-hmm.
And it says on the bottom, Dykes catches Crosetti between second and third. Now, Crosetti would have to be the one on the upper right, number 5.
Yeah.
And Dykes is Jimmy Dykes, who I think he was playing for Washington. But Jimmy Dykes ended up being a manager for many years. I think, actually, did he manage the Yankees at one point?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I think he might have managed the Yankees maybe after McCarthy or
And this is a 36?
Yeah.
Yeah, and with Crosetti wearing 5, I think at that time DiMaggio was still wearing number 9.
Yeah.
And then they
switched. This is a 36 card, but the photograph is probably from
pre DiMaggio, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why Crosetti's got 5 and he gave it up.
Yeah.
Um, so and this card, by the way, I don't remember where I got it, but I know I spent about $25 on it,
Good for you.
and it's a 3. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this again, 1930s. It has the 1930s feel to it. Yes, it's black and white, but it's got two, important players in baseball history on it: Jimmy
Yeah.
Dykes and Crissetti. I don't know who the other player is. I never did the research on it. I'm sure I could figure it out, but yeah, for like $20,
Yeah.
$25, whatever I
Did
spent
they
on it.
have pastel or colorized versions of these too, Dan, in this set?
Yeah, there's I forget. Yeah, there's what is it called? It's the R311 maybe, or 312. I have one of those cards. It's a pastel. There's a Johnny Mize where it looks like he's wearing lipstick. But yeah, those cards are, I think those are also 36.
Okay.
And there might be a pastel version of this too, because I know the card that I have a pastel. It's the Jimmy Wilson is carrying the two Wayner brothers on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Not Wilson. I forget what his name is, but anyway, that card can be in both black and white and pastel in two different sets. So I think you're right about this. I'll bet you there is a pastel of this.
Yeah. There's a lot of these. Looking at the action photograph there, a lot of the magazines are just full of those type of shots with
Yep.
the caption underneath. And what I'm going to do, one of my collecting next journey might be to do stories on a certain game, and just show the players that are shown in the photograph. It'll shorten the video up because sometimes my videos tend to go a little bit too long. But
You're preaching to the choir here. I'm going an hour and a half at most times.
It's all good quality, though. That's the thing. Guys should stick around and watch.
Yeah, no, it's fun to just chat with someone, and then it's on recording. So here's three items that I figured I would show off. One is, of course, Crissetti. That is a pre-rookie card, and I've showed this on the channel before. It's a Z-Nut card from 30. I think it's 33. I forget. Where is it? I gotta find it. I got so much laying out here. Oh, here it is. No, it's 31. I'm sorry. It's 31 Z-Nut card. This was a little expensive, considering it's a 1 and it's creased and it doesn't have a tab on it. But I mean, I figured you never see this. I don't know what the pop.
Oh, it's a great card. Yeah.
I don't know what the pop count is, but it's pretty low. I know the pop count of the one in the middle. It's 1. It's a 1 of 1. This is George Selkirk outside of the Yankees spring training facility in 1942. The photographer was my grandfather. I did a show on these photographs. There are 8 of them early in my channel, and it got very few views, but I always like to show these because, like I said, my grandfather went down to Florida. It was 1942. I don't know who he went with or the story behind it, but he took photographs of 3 different spring training facilities.
Those are absolutely priceless.
This one is in St. Petersburg, Florida. Oh,
Yeah.
Absolutely priceless. My mother had this after my grandfather passed away. My mother had this, and my mother gave them to me, and she said, "Daniel, you can have these as long as you don't sell them ever."
Yeah.
And my mother passed away in 2006, and I found these in a box of stuff that was my stuff, and I brought them and made them part of my collection. I was thinking about getting them graded, but I figure I don't need them graded. What are they going to tell me?
Yeah.
And so,
well, to have that family connection is so special. The one item that I have, my dad didn't collect cars, my grandfather didn't, but I do have speaking in 1939, I have my grandfather's radio that he purchased this in 1939. I think it was a Kenmore. I forget the brand name, but I'm sure he listened to many a game. My dad he was born and they grew up in the Bronx, went to Fordham and the whole deal. So those guys, I'm sure they listened to many a game on that radio, and that's my family connection to 1939 and the Yankees. So I think I'm thrilled for you having photographs. Those are perfect.
Well, the other thing is there's handwriting on the bottom, and I'm intimately familiar with my mother's handwriting, but I don't think this is hers. I think it was actually my grandfather who wrote that at the bottom, and it's a similar handwriting to my mother's handwriting, which is interesting.
And is it just saying identifying George Selkirk? Is that what it says?
It says George Selkirk, Yanks, St. Petersburg, Florida.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So, and there's 8 of those, but Selkirk is the only one who was on the 39 team, so I pulled it out. And then that on the right is much later than 39. In fact, it's 1949. Bowman of Tommy Henrik, and I just love this card because of how the red shines.
Oh
and
yeah.
A lot of these 49 Bowmans are like that. You know, the color is just striking, and this particular one, you know, and it's Tommy Henrik, and it's late in his career, but I think it's just a beautiful card.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
And then you sent me these 4, which are all players from the team.
Yeah, Bump Hadley and Cressetti and Birdwolf and Selkirk. And, you know, we talked about the fact that why were these guys left off? And, you know, Jake Powell and so forth, and Arndt Jorgens were in there. But a quick story on Cressetti, as you know, he won, I think, 8 rings with, you know, as a player, and he won an additional 9 as a coach. But I'll give you a quick story. I actually am a personal friend, and I play pickleball with his nephew, same last name, Cressetti, and my buddy is named Steve Cressetti, and he gave me the story that actually Frankie stopped collecting rings or accepting rings. He wanted shotguns because he was a big hunter. And, you know, and I thought, well, that's an interesting story. So I think he's got 4 or 5 shotguns in lieu of rings. And I thought, you know, I better double check this. So I did go on SABR and double checked. And sure enough, it mentions the fact that he collected, took shotguns instead of the rings. So I thought that was a great story on Cressetti. Great ball player. Great ball player.
I did a Seattle Pilots show probably in the last summer. And Cressetti was a coach for the 1969 Seattle Pilots. After I think the Yankees were sort of, you know, moving on because he'd been a coach for so many. He'd been with the Yankees for like 40 years at that point.
Oh yeah.
So that is I don't own that card. That Cressetti Diamond Stars card is
it's I got it here, and you know it got a 1.5, I think, because on the back it's a little beat up on the back. But there's no, I don't see any major creasing in it. But you know, it's still got nice registration, not the best centering, but it's a Cressetti card.
And the artwork is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And I have tried to buy that card, and I've been unsuccessful. So I guess we're gonna get to the World Series, which happened in October of '39, obviously. And the Yankees. Hate to be a spoiler, but the Yankees swept in 4 games. Spoiler alert. So you have here. I'm extremely now thinking I need to get one of these. A 1939 World Series program.
Yeah, this is from Game 1, played at Yankee Stadium, and obviously Lou Gehrig did not play in the series, but they honored him with the cover. And it's a scored copy. That's why I know it's Game 1. And this was a game that the Yankees won 2-1. Red Ruffing beat Paul Derringer. And I know we'll be showing their cards a little later. But it's to me, it's a really fascinating piece because, you know, there's, I don't know, I think 58,000 people attended that game. I don't know how many programs are still in existence, but This has got, and it's a little bit fragile, but I'll try and open it up and give you just a look at what we're dealing with here. Here's the picture of, you know, the team. They go through all the different players and just give the short bios and the photographs. But it's just it's living history right there. And I'm just thrilled to have something like this. And here's the, just for the record, got the Crosley Field Game 3. And this was one where Charlie Keller hit 2 home runs. And that was the first time a rookie had ever hit 2 home runs in a World Series game. He was the star of the show, but we'll go through that in more detail.
Um, that is, you told me. I thought it was Gordon. It is Gordon.
It is Gordon, yes.
And what is this? Is this just a media guide kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a big version of the TV guide, but it was a radio guide. And it literally lists all the radio programs that were scheduled for the upcoming week. And it includes, it's got October 8th and 9th games. And it also talks about, mentions a little bit about the war, which had just started. This is from October. So, Hitler invaded Poland in September 1st, 1939, and he was on the march. Mm-hmm. So this was a very significant time in history.
This is the two 1939 MVPs. Bucky
Correct.
Walters on the left, who won, I believe, 26 games with a ERA under 2. And DiMaggio, of course. Bucky Walters, interestingly enough, and I'll get to his card, came up as an outfielder.
Correct, yeah.
And it was actually a really good hitter. If you look at his hitting stats, even while a pitcher, I think he batted 300 in 1939.
Yeah. And on the flip side, Red Ruffing was also a former outfielder, but he had as a young kid, but had an accident where he lost 4 of his toes in a mining accident as a kid.
Oh, I didn't know.
He lost his speed, turned him into a pitcher, and he, like Walters, very good hitting pitchers.
Yeah.
Which, back then I think they probably worked harder at it. Because it's just an extra bat to have.
So these are 2 cards from a set that I absolutely adore. It's the 1939 Cincinnati Reds set, which is, I think, our W7111, I think is the, I don't know. I'll check it.
Yeah.
But so 1939 MVP voting, 3 of the top 4 was Cincinnati Reds. Walters won. Mize finished second. Johnny Mize had a terrific year that year for the Cardinals. And then these 2 people, Paul Derringer, who was another outstanding pitcher who has fallen short of Hall of Fame voting, as has Walters. And then the one on the left, the stretching, is the first baseman Frank McCormick, who finished, I believe, 4th in the MVP voting. But then in 1940, the following season, Frank McCormick won the MVP of the National League. And 8 years later, he would be a veteran backup first baseman for the 1948 Braves, which is why I collect him, because he's one of the 48 Braves.
Oh, very good. Yeah, here's a quick picture of DiMaggio and Frank McCormick.
See this. Yes.
McCormick on was, the flip side, you got, we haven't gotten to Ernie Lombardi yet, but there's Joe and Ernie.
McCormick was the best hitter on that team, and Lombardi obviously is a Hall of Famer. He was quite good himself, but McCormick's numbers are just fantastic with 39 and 40.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 more. Here's Bucky Walters. That is I just got this recently. 1936 Worldwide Gum. This is his rookie card. He is on Philadelphia at this point, and he is an outfielder. And I think he was converted to pitcher that season.
Yeah.
This card is rare. It's a low pop. I think it's under 20. 20 total graded.
Wow.
And so I spent a lot for it. It was like somewhere around $150, and then I graded it, and it got an appropriate grade. But I needed a card from that set, and I needed a Bucky Walters card.
I'll tell you, Dan, that's one aspect of your collection. You've got so many of these wonderful low population cards. Yeah. Fantastic. How many years has that occurred over? What's the time period where you've been acquiring all those?
Last 5 years, basically.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, and then on the right is Frank McCormick. Of course, we just talked about him.
Yeah.
I bought that card, I believe, at the Philly show, ungraded from dealer by the name of Bill Chappell, and it got a 4. So I was pretty happy about that.
Very good.
The card probably cost me about $15. And you sent us here, and we'll get to see more. I guess that's the 39 Bucky Walters, a card that I probably should own.
Yeah.
I
Got
know.
that one right here.
Yeah, the 40 next to that is oh, let me see. Where's Bucky? Oh, so Buddy Rosar,
Correct.
48
Yeah,
homer.
Buddy's the guy that ended up replacing Bill Dickey.
Uh-huh. And now the 3 cards on the bottom.
Those were pitchers, and I said earlier that all I have is SGC. I acquired Steve Sundra, who was a starting pitcher and had a pretty good career. This was, I believe, his second year, and I just got his card recently. The middle is Johnny Murphy, who was the relief pitcher
Yep.
and had 19 saves during 1939, as we talked about. And then on the far right is Oral Hildebrand, who I started game 3, I believe, 3 or 4, and pitched 4 innings. But Murphy ended up winning that game, got the credit for the victory. So some fun cards there.
What card issue is the one in the middle, the Johnny Murphy?
That is from the 1943 New York Yankees team stamp set.
Okay.
And I actually have the entire. You'll see that later.
That's coming up.
There it
is.
Yeah, and the reason why I got this was to fill out my 1939 guys. Some of them didn't have 39 cards or even 40 cards. So I figured, well, what the heck? And this particular set of 30 has, I think, 5 or 6 Hall of Famers in it. So it's not too bad. And I got it for the price less than the USPS would charge me for 30 stamps. So I figured that's a pretty good deal.
So the 39 World Series was a 4-game sweep. Red Ruffing won, as you'd mentioned, game 1, 2-1. Monty Pearson came out and won game 2, 4-0. I think it might have been his last World Series start for the Yankees.
Probably so. Yeah, he went 7 1/3 hitless, but then gave up a couple of hits, but still won the game.
And then game 3 was Bump Hadley won 7-3. And game 4, as you mentioned, they won in 10 innings, 7-4. Johnny Murphy was the winner. Bucky Walters was the loser. Bucky Walters was the MVP in 1939, but in the World Series, he was 0-2.
Yeah. And that final game, you probably are well aware of this event, but that was the famous Ernie Lombardi snooze, where in the 10th inning, the Yankees, I forget who got on base. Was it Charlie Keller, I think? And he ended up coming around. DiMaggio had a hit, and the throw in from the outfield, Ivo Goodman out in right field fumbled Keller's, and Keller came home. And on the throw home, the ball knocked Ernie Lombardi down, and then he was just laying there, and nobody else covered the ball. It was just sitting there on the dirt, and DiMaggio makes this fantastic slide to come in, and that was the end of the game. And it was one of those things where later on I guess they determined that Ernie Lombardi had actually just been hit in the cup, and kind of knocked them a little bit uncomfortable, so to speak. So pretty dramatic finish to a 4-game sweep by the Yankees.
Yeah. So we have, I think we have one last slide. You sent me this, and I zoomed in and read the whole thing. And it's baseball in the year 2039, which was, of course, 100 years later. But they were, I guess, referencing the fact that baseball started essentially in 1839. So they were 100 years later, and then they were going to go 100 years into the future. And some things about this I found sad. Some things about it I found really dumb. And some other things I found to be really prescient. There's reference to Lou Gehrig playing forever, basically, which the sad part about it is this was written probably weeks before. I think you have the actual dates, right?
Yeah, actually, this was from the June 1939 issue of Baseball Magazine, the same, the Abner Doubleday cover. And, Gehrig's diagnosis was official as of June 19th. So this article and the publication was already out, and they had no idea. And obviously Gehrig had stepped away from the game for a few months at that point. But I think at this stage, a lot of people felt, okay, he's probably going to recover and he'll make a comeback. But obviously that never did happen.
Yeah. And there is a reference to a baseball being played in other countries, including East Asia, which is really kind of clairvoyant.
Yes.
Because, now that we have Asian players, in fact, dominating the major leagues.
Well, the interesting thing there, too, from a world history perspective is 1939, Japan was not exactly on positive terms with the United States, obviously a couple of years before Pearl Harbor. But the fact that in the baseball magazine, they're talking about international and baseball and so forth, pretty interesting. And obviously, Babe Ruth had made a tour there in 34, famous baseball tour.
And then there is unfortunate reference to Hitler in not realistic terms, as we would know later on.
Correct. Yeah.
Not a negative portrayal of Hitler, which is really kind of shocking. Yeah. Because in 39, he'd already been, there was already talk of him being aggressive and wanting to take over Europe. And I'm not sure, the newsreels had started in the mid 30s. With the aggression. So I'm not so sure why it's not as accurate as it should be, even for the time period. But I did think that they're talking about baseball in 2039 being an international game was quite impressive. And of course, 2039 is pretty close to. We're not.
I'm hoping to make it.
I hope to make it. Yeah, I hope to make it. I would be. 75, 76. Yeah.
I don't even want to do the math. I'll be 83, 84, something like that.
You'll still be with us, but I am extrememe thankful, sir, that you took time out of your day to come in, and not just today, because you sent me all this material, and that's the wonderful thing about doing the show is having somebody like yourself who is a meticulous collector of great items, send them to me, and I get to read them and look at them, and it's just like I get a little bit of a feeling of having these in my collection for a day or two. So
I tell you, Dan, right back at you. I was honored, thrilled that you even took the time to invite me, because I've watched so many of your guests and the collections that they have, that you have. I felt I was going to let you down here because I didn't have so much information for you. But it's just been a lot of fun, and I just hopefully we can reconnect on another project sometime down the road.
Absolutely. I admire you for many reasons, and one of which I'm not going to talk about. But the other thing is tremendous amount of respect and admiration for your collection and for you as a person. And I'm happy that you're back on camera, and happy that this is one of the first shows. I know you did Drew's show, and Drew is a great guy, and I love that episode. And that was I feel the great reintroduction of Rob into YouTube, and happy that you chose to come onto my channel. So, sir,
thank you.
Really appreciate you coming on. Viewers, will have more of these kinds of great shows coming up. I've got a lot going on. I don't even want to. There's so many. I have shows scheduled now out into April. So
that's fantastic.
It's a good period for the show. So anyway, thank you, sir. Thank you, viewers, and we'll see
Thanks,
you
everybody.
guys soon.